Welcome back to Coaches Exploring Clarity. Today we're going to be looking at Chapter 14, The Power of Presence. And it starts with a quote from Walt Whitman, poet and journalist. We convince by our presence. And this one, I don't know for you guys, but for me, when I started getting into this line of work, I kind of had a realization that probably my whole life I'd never really been present to anything.
Huh.
And in fact, I for the most part, I'd say it was intentional. Like I thought the way to win the game of life was to treat it like a chess match, like always thinking 10 moves ahead and planning for all potential outcomes. And I don't know. So I spent very little time in the present moment and most of my time analyzing and planning. And, for the most part, in a lot of ways, I think it served me well. But at the same time, when I look back now, I realize I didn't really, stop and smell the roses kind of thing. Like, there's just so many parts of my life that passed me by without really experiencing them the way that I could have or should have.
Yeah. Yeah, and as I read that, the thing that came to me, very similar, Greg, that because I kind of think that most of my past life, I was just completely oblivious to all things,
Mm,
and 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 just that Walt Whitman says, we convince by our presence that effectively, if you are present, kind of thing, and like me, just noticing how I wasn't present to anything really, and and therefore I kind of appeared, or perhaps or didn't appear at all. You become transparent. People don't see you, don't hear you, don't listen to you,
mm,
which can be very sort of. Or guess what happened to me was that I withdrew because I'd start thinking a lot of things like, well, nobody really cares, but it was me that wasn't present. It
mm.
wasn't the everybody else. Yeah.
Hmm. Geez, I hadn't even thought of any of that when I read this section, and that's really interesting because I'm thinking back to times where I wasn't, where like you said, Greg, you're focused on the next thing, the planning and the set the goals and do the goals or get the next job or move or it's. I think I was in the future so much.
Mm.
I think I probably lived a lot in the future that the next thing without, like you say, stopping and smelling the roses. I have I've certainly reflected on that since, not in this chapter, interestingly.
Mm.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't
Yeah.
it? Hmm.
Yeah. And how Jamie just then on the next page says, like, present is whatever is happening moment to moment prior to your habitual thinking, which just from what you say, Lynn, it's the idea like you're always thinking about something, if not something else. And it often what can be past or present, but it often is in your case, you're saying it like, what am I going to do next? And what's next? What's next? What's next? They're just in that. I'm kind of hearing how often I've done that too. And so you actually miss the moment. It's gone. And just again, considering the idea of living a whole life like that is pretty frustrating. And the idea of habitual thinking and indeed how as time passes, perhaps how difficult it can be for some people to actually miss it altogether for their whole lives. Because we think so much, and then we think even reading a sentence. Well, okay, well it's prior to my habitual thinking. Well, how the hell do I do that?
Mm.
If
Yeah.
everything I do is so habitual, I can't even get near it, sort of thing. And yet, of course, I think all of us have in some way or another with the work we do. Yeah.
It reminds me when my kids were young, my wife was into scrapbooking. I don't know if you guys have went through a stint of scrapbooking,
Oh yeah.
but it was like
Uh-huh.
everything we did as a family, whether it was, family get togethers or going to Disney World or whatever, everything was through the lens of making a scrapbook page about it. Like what photos do I need to get? What is it that I want to capture? So, we have a lot of great scrapbooks, but when I think back, like, I don't know that my wife really enjoyed any of the events or things that we were at, because she was always building the scrapbook in her mind of what she needed to collect or gather, or what staged photo ops she had to create to make for a good scrapbook. And I think of, the last few years, we've gone to a number of concerts. And I catch myself like, oh my God, this is my favorite song. And the first thing I do is I put my phone up and try to record it. And I'm watching the concert through this little screen. And I'm thinking to myself, and then I catch myself and go like, I should just put my phone down and just enjoy being here. Like I'm so worried about enjoying it later that I'm forgetting to enjoy it right now while it's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Elaine. Go.
I was just going to say, very recently, I hardly go anywhere, but I went back to the UK for Christmas and a Rod Stewart concert. And that's exactly what I did. And then, like, halfway through Rod's first song, I thought, what on earth are you doing here? Just enjoy it, for God's sake. Put my phone away. And then, of course, I couldn't find it, because at one point you have to put the light on, and because we don't smoke anymore you
don't have a lighter anymore.
Yeah, you don't have a lighter anymore. And then I couldn't find it, and I couldn't find a way to switch it on. So it was like, damn, missed that bit as well. Yeah.
Crazy.
No, there's a name I haven't.
I mean, we could literally pull up thousands of experiences like that, couldn't we?
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's only 3:10 here now. I bet if I thought not even hard enough, I could think of a few areas today where I've been in that place, not in the moment. Yeah, I already can.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I love these next two paragraphs, and I remember this example way back. I don't know, one of the first times that I ever heard Jamie, talking about being in a situation that could be wonderful or might be. When there's your example, Greg, your example of your holidays, and for your wife, that could have been a wonderful experience, but she was kind of busy and preoccupied.
Yeah.
It might not have played out like that for her. And I just really like these two examples where it demonstrates that it really is about, the feeling we're in. It's just about that. It could be the most boring situation and you're having the best time, or the best situation and you're having the worst time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a friend right now who just had an amazing trip to Iceland. That she'd planned this trip for a very long time with another friend, and she sent me a message, maybe day 6 or something. So she's in her mid to late 50s now. Her life's in whatever place it's in. And she sent me a message and she said, I really wish I'd come here when my kids were young, because I think it would have changed my life. And I was like, oh no, I bet it wouldn't. Like, her experience of it now, and I will say, knowing her, because I do know her, her experience of it now, it's highly likely or possible that at that time, had she gone and done that when she was 20 something, looking at the wide open spaces and no people and no noise and whatever, would she really have appreciated that then, with her busyness or her kids running around, or was it that, this is where I am, and actually appreciating where I am? It struck me as funny.
Yeah.
I think you're right.
Go ahead, Greg.
I was going to say, I think you're right. The more often than not, we think we would have enjoyed something, or we think things would be a certain way, but you can almost guarantee that it wouldn't work out that way, for sure.
I've actually forgotten what I was going to say. That's okay.
My apologies.
No, not at all. It was regarding something Lynne said, but it's gone out of my mind. No worries. There you go. You see, I think I got distracted with the cat. It took me out of my present moment.
Yeah.
The next thing I highlighted was on page 155. There is only ever this moment. The present is all there is. The future and the past are thought-generated illusions that you only ever experience in the here and now.
I underlined that too. I'm reading, and it's the whole chapter is speaking to this, I think. But again, those words particularly underlined again, how personally speaking, I find it difficult sometimes to find the now, which is crazy in itself. It's almost a paradox even saying it, but yeah, but it definitely it struck me. I actually came from that, and I'm actually creating a post from those words. That's how much it struck me, but I can't quite explain why.
I don't know if it was Jamie or somebody else, but like the idea that it's always now, like that's it's never anything other than now.
Yeah, I remember as well something Jamie said that I think I even then mentioned in the webinar, which I guess made so much sense to me that it can't be anything else, in the sense that our physical body is always now. But if our brain or our thoughts are housed within our physical body, where else can we be? And then, to that, so how can it look like most of the time we're actually not in the now? Think about it.
It's what this, I also, that was the only, well, no, I did highlight something else on that page, but what came to me from that, other than thinking about myself and how I get caught up in not the now, when people turn up and they have preoccupation or worry, or they're talking about problems, they don't turn up and say, right now, I feel, typically people don't turn up and say, right this very minute, it's like, it's all surrounding. It's, this happened, or this is about to happen, or it's this whole preoccupation with what did go on or what might. It's so rare for people to turn up and actually talk about what's happening in this very moment, because the only thing that's happening in this very moment is they're talking to you. That is the only thing that's happening in that very moment. And sometimes, and that's interesting, you're smiling, Elaine, because last week I brought someone back to that, and she did that, but it brought a smile to her face, because she just kind of went, it was like an oh moment. It was, like it genuinely had not occurred to her that the only thing that was happening in that very moment was she was talking to me. That was the only thing that was happening. And when I pointed it out that she did exactly what you just did there, she had this big smile, and it was like, oh, it's just so curious. Yeah, it doesn't occur to us until it does.
Yeah. And I was just thinking, the reason I was smiling then, because as we spoke, was it yesterday? And I answer your call, and you say, how are you? And I said, I don't know how I am. But then instantly I looked for something to feel. But actually, if you think about it, we go around being very nice to other people and saying, hi, how are you? When they're perfectly happy actually in that oblivion, which is just that moment. They're actually not thinking about anything. They just are. You've just answered the phone and that's it. And then we go and ask people how they are. How ridiculous is that? They were doing fine before you asked them.
Yeah.
as it happened in our conversations, and there's something wonderful. But do you know what I mean? In that split second,
Yeah, it's funny.
I thought, oh, I don't know how I am. I really don't know.
Um,
Few things that showed up for me there. One was, Lynne, when you were talking about your experience of your client, it's just like that realization, like, oh yeah, I don't have to bring that baggage with me, or I can just leave it wherever it was. I don't need to bring it into the present moment, because whatever it is isn't happening right now. I think that's a huge realization for people to have. Very freeing. I know I've had an experience of that. That was like an enormous weight off my shoulders.
Yeah.
And then to Elaine's point with the how are you? It's like, yeah, we're like putting people into a reflection of, or a judgment of their, we're asking them to, evaluate something that
yeah.
really doesn't add any value, or like it's just such a I don't know, a nothing, like a habitual thing to ask somebody, like a courtesy, or I don't know however you would describe it, but it really doesn't. And I think what I'm thinking of is like the way I used to start coaching calls with clients was asking them, so how have you been, or how are you, whatever. But through my training, it's like, well, that's often not a very productive way to start, because it just spirals into a whole bunch of stuff that's not even
story.
Yeah, not happening now. It's more, the clarity approach of what would be helpful for you at the end of this call, or what would you like to achieve as a result of this call. Like, it's a much different way to begin a conversation than how are you? Because how are you is so backward looking versus being in the present and looking at what you want to create.
Yeah, indeed, because how can you know how you are in the present moment if you are just are?
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe a better question is,
how can you know?
Yeah. How would you like to be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to try very hard, just in casual conversation, just to say something like, "You're looking good." I think that'll do. Hello, how are you? You're looking good.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Or I don't know.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Well, even when Lynne and I first joined this Zoom call, she was asking me how I was, and I was, saying, "Oh, well, I hurt my knee this week," and blah,
Yeah,
blah,
there you
all
go.
this stuff. It's like, in the current moment, I wasn't experiencing any pain in my knee, or because I'm just sitting here, I'm not doing anything. But that was, that question brought me to thinking about the last few days and how my knee's been bothering me. Anyway, it's curious. It's interesting how a simple question can seemingly take us to different places, which isn't really a surprise as coaches, because we know, like, our toolbox is questions, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just so interesting, because what you're pointing to, Greg, is when you ask people that question, there are a variety of responses, and I know what mine normally is, but it's probably never what it is. So you responded to how were you, pretty much. You didn't respond to how are you now. You didn't even respond to that. You responded to, oh, this week it's been about like this, my knee was sore, whatever. Elaine didn't have a clue yesterday, which I thought was really cool. In my family, we have a standard response to how are you, which is typically fine, because people don't want to talk about stuff. It's really, no, it's fascinating. I'm thinking, why is that a standard question when we first see people or meet up with people or call people? Why is that I understand with clients. I don't think I do ask clients that, actually, but with just amongst us, why is that our opening question? It's so interesting. But it's not the topic of today.
No, but in some way, yeah. I was just going to say
Yeah.
it's somehow more interesting, or somehow makes more sense as we move into the principles of thought, mind, and consciousness. How the Oriental approach, like either the Namaste or the Sayonara, which has a much deeper meaning behind the greeting.
Mm.
It's I see you, I respect you, I'm with you kind of thing. It's the Namaste.
Mm-hmm.
And even I can't remember what, but even aloha in Hawaii has a huge meaning behind it. It isn't sort of saying hello, how are you? It's much more of a I am honored to be in your presence sort of thing.
Mm.
If you think about it, it makes much more sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
It seems to be a wonderful point of connection if connection is also kind of the basis of our work.
Yeah,
And yet
those are
perhaps,
more greetings than inquiry, aren't they? That
yeah,
they're more all encompassed. It's like a greeting
exactly.
as opposed to an inquiry.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
there can't be any judgment on it because it's
that's it.
it's neutral.
Yeah, it's just a recognition that you are in front of another person.
Mm.
So, which
Mm.
is somehow much softer. It's somehow much
Mm.
easier. Somehow.
Does.
Yeah.
Mm.
Then from greetings, well, I like the little box with the distinction meditating versus meditation. Um, because I've been beating myself up for a long time, telling myself I ought to do some meditation, and I know I'll never do it. But then the realization that it's not really about the act of meditating or sitting there for hours on end in some, for me, very uncomfortable position, staring at a candle flame, which basically would bore me to death. But the idea of entering a state of meditation and being able to notice that, as I was saying before, and when we called you and Eileen yesterday, and I said, I don't know, that was actually because it was a state of
Mm.
here and now and meditation, if you like. So I love that distinction. And in a certain sense, it's one of those things that kind of you think would be good for you, but to me was unavailable because of the way I am, or so believe. And it just makes it kind of makes yeah, it's the idea of things being more available to you without having to do something that somebody else is telling you to do.
Mm.
That's what sort of struck me about the little box. And it's kind of a nice distinction.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the part in
yeah,
there that I highlighted was the part right at the end of that box, which is just as realizations are context sensitive, so is clarity. The meditative state you find yourself enjoying will be fit for purpose, bringing you what
Mm.
you need when you need it. And then
yeah,
he goes on to talk about the difference between athletes or computer programmers in that their clarity or meditative state is fit for purpose for what they're doing.
yeah, yeah, indeed.
Yeah, I think what that whole especially the distinction says to me is um, as opposed to it being a practice, which is what you were referring to, Elaine. It's that it's always available to us. It might not always come up, but it's always available to us. So we don't actually have to do anything. And I'm a bit like you when I went through all the apps and other things and felt like every morning, like this is something I should be doing. I just felt irritated. It wasn't helping me at all. I'm like, I'm
Mm.
sitting on the floor and I'm listening to
Yeah,
something and I know I should be relaxing is what I was telling myself, or
yeah,
I should be zoning out or not thinking. And yeah, so it's always available to us.
yeah.
And yeah.
Like a lot of and that yeah, that's really you said the magic word apps. Recently, I haven't been sleeping very well, so I end up scrolling, and there's these apps come up, and they'll teach you how to sleep. And of course, I just can't get my head around that for the life of me, because the first thought that comes to mind is, well, what if I lose my phone? And
Mm.
I'm stymied. I'm going to have to stay awake forever. And then it just struck me, well, of course, if it weren't for contaminated thinking, sleep would be available to all of us all the time at any moment when we so need or desire. And so, that's one in the eye for all the apps that, or anything that is like a tool or something that looks like it's going to give you something that is actually something that is already residing within us.
Yeah.
And most of the time, the things that we're looking for, the things that we think apps or tools or courses or whatever school is going to give us is always something that we actually have. Like we don't look for other things, really. It's sort of like high up on, if you like, if there is a scale, it's right up to the absolute sense of peace, resistance, clarity. We're always searching for that. And for me, we're just never going to find it in an app. And
not so far.
Not so far, yes. We were thinking of AI there. No, I won't buy into that one. I won't buy
not
into
going
that
there.
one either.
We're not
No.
going down that rabbit hole. No.
No.
No, it's true.
No.
The next thing I'd highlighted was on 158. The outside-in misunderstanding is the biggest time thief there is. The reason that stood out to me is, as you probably both know, like time management has been one of these things that I've been, self-proclaimed expert in, or I don't know, something I've tried to teach my, people that worked for me all these years in business, and then more recently did a webinar about time management hacks and things like that. And I see this a lot with my daughter because she's a lot like I was, which I'll take full responsibility for training her to be this way. But the chess match idea, like she's always playing out every possible scenario, every permutation and combination of what could happen, and preparing for every inevitability. So like instead of living in the now and handling whatever comes up, she's living like 10 lives simultaneously because she's, got solutions or contingencies for every possible outcome. And when we've talked about it, I've said, like, it must be exhausting, like living so many lives, like so many scenarios all at the same time. And I think about that, like this notion that outside in misunderstanding is the biggest time thief there is. It's like, yeah, like there is only 24 hours in a day and 7 days in a week, but if you're occupying your brain power with all kinds of contaminated thinking that isn't serving you, it's you're almost living, like I said, 10 days at once. It's a very heavy burden to carry.
Yeah.
And when you can enjoy the now, like when you're in the now, even if it's not a joyful situation, just the experience of whatever it is just so much more meaningful or tangible. I don't know what the right word is, but like it doesn't have to be necessarily a happy experience, but that's what's showing up for me.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that, with the second part of that paragraph. The last part, actually. We intuitively know when to pause and when to press on, and when to rest and when to proceed, when we are not in contaminated thinking. And I noticed that with myself, and indeed, perhaps to an outsider looking on, I would perhaps appear, as I'm doing my daily work, let's say, which could involve lots of stuff around a computer, writing, thinking, creating, doing something. You will notice that now I'm several, at any moment, I'm out on my back balcony, just clearing my head, but it's not forecast. It's something that I do something, and then I just think, oh, I'm going to have to clear my head now and go off and do it. because I also know that if I stay there, my head will just fill up even further and I won't make progress. So that the best thing to do is stop.
Mm.
And okay, so I seem to do that a lot, but I've also got over the contaminated thinking around that because it means you're lazy, you're distracted, you're this, that, and the other. No, this is how I work.
Mm.
And again, that's something about what we were saying before. It's about capturing that moment when you have the clarity to know that in my case, I have to go outside and just look at the space outside.
Mm.
And I can say it's almost 100% of the time now that as I do that, I just fall into a space of clarity and I can stand out there for maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes and come back and know what it is that I have to do. And it might just be a line that I have to write, one line. But you know what? Rather than a blank page, one line is just big news for me. And I'm, it's getting, and Jamie also says this later on, it grows. The time is getting more, and the quantity of stuff that I'm doing because of the clear space that I have is getting more and more and more. Yeah.
Yeah, it almost expands time. It's amazing.
Yeah.
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 What I was thinking about when you were
yeah.
talking about your balcony breaks, I think you and I may have talked about this before, is I had this notion that, oh, who knew that smokers had it right all this time? Like
Yeah.
all these,
Yeah.
apart from the smoking part of it, but the, frequent little breaks to go and clear
Yeah.
your mind
Yeah.
and come back and be productive.
Yeah.
And then when you need another break, go to have another smoke, come back, you're back to a clear mind.
Yeah.
There's something to be said about that for sure.
Yeah. Interesting you say that because as an ex-smoker, I was a little bit worried about that because I had a feeling that I might have connected the me going to the balcony with the idea of having a cigarette. And I was extraordinarily surprised to find that did not happen. And I was also worried about, oh, well, I might be drinking thousands of cups of coffee then. And that didn't happen either. And I actually found that I could just go out. Literally, I just lean on my little balcony, just sort of put my hand like that, or just lean on it. And I also find that I find myself very still, which probably you've both noticed how I move a lot, even when I'm talking here, my hands are waving around and things. But I actually find that I go into a beautiful place of stillness and I'm not sort of scratching myself or put my finger in my ear or this kind of thing. I just go very still. And then there's another kind of something tells me, right, time's up now, you can go back in. Got an idea, I can come back in. And it sort of happens all by itself now. Yeah.
I'm just thinking, I have a couple of people who are popping into my mind actually, and I'm thinking about the whole notion of contaminated thinking in time and where their contaminated thinking is taking up so much time trying to they're two very different people, but the conversation is exactly the same as both of them. It's interesting. Taking up so much time trying to avoid stuff that they have convinced themselves they need to do, they should do, and they don't want to do. So they have all this so much that I mean, actually, last week as an exercise with one person, I said it jokingly, and then it turned into a thing where was let's actually calculate how much time that takes thinking about it. And a simple example was not doing the dishes. I mean, that's a simple thing. And in a week, I mean, the time that this person spends thinking about not doing dishes was phenomenal, to the point where she was like, how much time does it actually take me to do the dishes? Just the whole thinking around that. And, obviously this stuff behind that. But yeah, the whole notion of how much time that the thinking takes up, whether it's worrying about how to do a thing, how not maybe not to do a thing, or whatever it is, and the whole, just to your point, Elaine, the self-awareness to take yourself up, to a different place and let it fall away, really, and get some clarity around that.
There's probably a rule of thumb in there somewhere, like the actual thing only takes 10% of the amount of time that you spend thinking about not doing the thing, and whether that's the dishes, the laundry,
anything,
writing a post, doing a video, I don't know, whatever it is, it's
yeah.
It's amazing, like
and I love how
a new time management hack: stop thinking about not doing it and just do it.
Yes, exactly. You're wasting your time. I love the way, I don't know whether I've just noticed it now. I'm quite sure that this is how Jamie set the whole book out anyway, but I've just noticed in this chapter how like as it's almost like Jamie sort of, as he puts the words out there, he's sort of one step ahead. It's almost as if he's kind of just written it as his own mind is working. And because that paragraph for me read, the only thing that could have been next is the little box that he put the reality check. Because indeed, as I was reading all this, although not on by the time you've read it 3 or 4 times, it stops happening, and perhaps by the time you've gone through a whole clarity certification course or all these things stop happening. But I realized that, like, okay, you're telling me it's all the thinking, and what happens if we're not talking about just washing the dishes? Because, like, I've got this problem to solve, and I've got my husband to leave or divorce or to do something, or what else, and as Jamie says, what about problems that need solving urgently or apparently urgently, and that sentence, and again coming back to a sort of common sense. And of course, we haven't gone off into some transcendental state of meditation and living out, floating around in the clouds, because life happens. And Jamie just says, life is like any other contact sport. You're going to get your knocks. So all that's going to happen. Of course it is. That's what happens in the material world. But it's not the knocks that count. It's how you handle them. And I find that just so beautiful. It's like, oh God, it's okay. We can then it's okay. I used to think it was kind of worrying to think, oh, well, am I going to become some sort of angel floating about? And that kind of looked at the beginning, like, for me, very disconnecting. It means if I'm off into this spiritual realm, I'm going to be very different from all those people around me. So it kind of worried me sometimes to read what Jamie writes and what Sid Banks speaks of as well, of course. But this just, no, it's not the knocks that count. It's just how you handle them. Okay. Okay. Back to this world.
Yeah.
But with a enhanced understanding, of course.
Yeah, in that reality check box, I highlighted the part at near the beginning where it says there are 2 things that enable us to deal with any situation we encounter. Number 1, we each have within us a source of security, resilience, and well-being. Number 2, we each have within us a source of clarity, wisdom, and guidance. In fact, these things aren't just within you; they are you. And to me, that means, and I've heard Jamie say this in many coaching sessions with people. The problem isn't that whatever you think is going to happen happens. The problem is you think you can't handle it.
Yeah.
And he closes the loops, and not only can you handle it, you're built to handle it. And with these 2 things, you can basically handle anything that life throws at you. The harder the knock, the better. Like you've got what it takes to handle it.
Yeah, that's an extraordinary message of hope, I think. Thinking maybe of people who, borderline depressives or even worse. Let's say that is, I think, huge message, beautiful message.
Yeah.
Well, I've heard that many times, and also from some of the stuff that we've all been doing together. But what uh, I wonder the impact if as that's resonating with us as we hear that, as we hear it now, and as we've heard it recently, or whatever. But if there was an innate understanding of that when we were growing up, let's say, I mean, imagine having an innate understanding of that when you were, I'm thinking of as a teenager, for example, and all the things that go on in our minds as a teenager, the disasters that could befall us and how things can go horribly wrong. And if you really, really understood that that was the case and couldn't be taken away or denied, it's just, it seems to me even stronger than hope. It's just, it's so, I don't know, liberating somehow comes to the word to my mind. I don't know if that's the right word either,
Yeah.
but it just feels so huge because it's, well, it takes away fear, which is what stops so many of us doing so many things. You know, we're afraid of not being able to handle stuff. So and so just to have that knowing is,
I'm not sure why.
It's empowering.
Go ahead, Elaine.
Sorry, Greg.
Go ahead, Elaine.
It's empowering.
Totally.
Yeah.
The image that came to my mind was like when I watch my son play video games. It's almost like, you know, if only we'd known that there's this cheat code that we could have had unlimited lives and unlimited armor and weapons and I don't know what, all this stuff in a game that levels you up. You know, like it's you know, that's what that feels like to me. It's almost like a, you know, a real life cheat code. if you know that.
Yeah.
Like invincibility.
Yeah. And interesting, just thinking of that, it's something like Candy Crush is a game I play. And it struck me because which I regularly do, get it all wrong and I've lost all my points and I've been eaten up by all the sharks or whatever it is. This little message pops up and it says, "You fail." I said, "Well, what is that?" But then I've just thought just now, what is it? So there must be something in that app or the way they've set it out or how, or is it in me? Because why do I play another game? And if this, if that's not hope and resilience and resistance and courage, what is it? It's slapped across, you failed. Like, and yet I play another game. To see what, and I'm saying not to waste time or anything else, to see what I can do this time. Why do I do that? What is it that drives me to do that? Even though I've been told that I'm an absolute failure, and yet I go and play again. Weird. Yeah.
I suspect that all the smartest psychiatrists or psychologists, they work for Candy Crush or TikTok, and they know what what motivates people, how to manipulate your behavior.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
So
we wrap this one up with the thought experiment.
Yeah.
So on 160, thought experiment. If it wasn't for contaminated thinking, we discover that every day brings a one-to-one match of time and enterprise. Consider the curious statement, then reflect on the assertion that if it weren't for contaminated thinking, you'd find every activity you undertake to be engaging, absorbing, and fulfilling.
Even washing the dishes. 100% agree.
Yeah.
100% agree. Yeah.
When I read that, what came to me was this truly doing things for the sake of it, not for the sake of what may come from it, or what you've got on it, or whatever. It's just like I'm doing this thing for the actually being in the activity, or not necessarily an outcome, I guess. So I get very held up on the outcome.
It's funny. I found in the last year things like raking leaves in the yard in the fall, and then now in the spring cutting the grass. Like I used to think of them as annoying chores that I had to do, and now I don't know. I don't think about anything really when I'm doing it. I'm just enjoying kind of being out there, and an hour can go by, and it's just been enjoyable. Like, and at the end, I mean, my yard looks great, so I guess that's an added bonus. But yeah, my attitude towards it has definitely changed in the last year.
Yeah. Well, you said just my comment, washing the dishes, and I suddenly thought, well, why? What's so wonderful, or what could even become wonderful about washing the dishes? Well, I was wondering if perhaps there's some kind of, again, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but like inner guidance that would naturally bring a human being to want, sanitary cleanliness, hygiene, no moldy food, because it would be in a certain sense, it has a sense of survival in the good sense of the word survival. So it would make sense to wash the dishes and be happy doing it. Like you're just doing what nature would want, as Bateson said. In that sense, you're actually aligned in a certain sense with nature, as perhaps you in the garden, Greg, for the new nature to come through, you do need to clear off some of the old stuff.
Yeah.
You need to have a certain sense of, well, whatever it is that a plant needs to grow, because bless them, they're put in an artificial circumstance anyway, but you can kind of help them along a bit. So that kind of alignment in that sense to nature, which again is all already in us. So we're not actually doing something, not even for the sake of it. We're just doing it because you do. Just struck me as a thought. Or things become to me, they make more sense to do them. Even though as I am washing dishes and even enjoying it, I'm not even thinking about that. But I'm wondering if it's always something else that's guiding you to do things. Or I presume that it is, rather than I wonder. I'm presuming that it is.
Yeah.
And I guess it's also like, that's like going with the flow. Even for something as ridiculous as washing the dishes, if you like.
Yeah.
It makes sense to do it.
I've had this thought kind of related to presence, I guess, where I've heard many times people talk about how Sid Banks would always say, "Oh, this is the best cup of tea I ever had," something like that. And it reminded me, like, yeah, if you were totally present to every cup of tea you had, you would be sitting there holding your cup or your mug, and you'd feel the smoothness of the ceramic handle or the warmth. And as you put it up to take a sip, you'd get the aroma. And then as you took the sip, you'd be experiencing the heat and the taste and whatever the flavor, depending how, if you like, my grandma used to make our tea with a sandy bottom, which was like tons of sugar. But I was just thinking about, like, if you did dishes in that same way, right? Like you would just be immersed in all of your senses in the practice of doing dishes, feeling the warmth of the water, smelling the scent of the soap, and even I can just imagine, like, there's something rewarding almost about, like, wiping away the dirt, and rinsing it off, and the sparkle or the cleanliness. I don't know. I'm looking at washing dishes in a whole new way. Yeah. You may have just changed my marriage.
Yes. I feel like this. I feel like there's another book coming upon me. It's going to be Zen and the Art of Dishwashing.
There you go. Yeah.
Never mind the motorcycle maintenance.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh, oh wow.
Thank you guys.
Thanks so much. That was fun.
That was lovely. That
Yeah.
was fun. That was fun. Thanks.